everybody, welcome back to Pagan's Witchy Critter. My name is Pagan, and I am joined by the awesome Daniel Muller, who wrote The Shamanic Soul, which is, by the way, one of the best books I have read to date this year. I literally read it in about 4 hours. I couldn't put it down. It was fantastic. So, Daniel, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the accolades on the book. I appreciate that.
Oh, it was so good. Like literally, I was just like, okay, I'm gonna read the book, and usually I started about 2 or 3 weeks before the interview and do all my notes and all that stuff. I sat down on my couch with my cup of coffee. My coffee was cold before I picked up my coffee to drink it, and I was about 3/4 of the way through the book, and like 3 hours had passed. And I was like, what just happened here? So
Yay.
it was so good. It's like I said, one of the best books to date that I have read this year. I absolutely loved it. I'm
Thank
going
you.
to recommend it. It's probably one of the best shamanic books I have read so far uh to date. So well done.
Wow. Yeah, I appreciate that. I was actually truly aiming to make the material as accessible as possible. And when I set out to write the book, so that means a lot to me. Appreciate that.
You definitely did do that. And it was one of those books that was very easy to connect with. Your stories were so easy to really just feel like you were a part of them and that you could understand them. And you were just, it was such a beautiful, well written book. I'm just so honored that you actually got to write it and that I got to read it. And it was, like I said, just almost perfection.
You heard it here first, everybody.
So, as I do with all my shows, if you guys want to buy the book, there will be a link in the description. I highly recommend it. So please check out this book, especially if you are interested in shamanic work in any way, shape, or form. This is one of the best books to buy. There you go. There's my shameless plug. And let's talk about shamanism. Obviously, your book describes kind of how you got into it, but how, for kind of the audience who, because obviously some of my listeners are not big readers, they want to just do the listening part. What really brought you into shamanism that you would like to talk about today?
Sure. Well, what kind of drew me to it was just even growing up, I was always attracted to um, the world of spirit,
Mm-hmm.
to the natural world, but also alternatives to mainstream religion in general. So I, the primary component of shamanism that draws me to it is that you have a religious structure, but there's always a root to that religious structure that was really about the original women or men that are the precedents to the religious structure, where it was just them in the natural world, them in spirit, no hierarchy, no doctrine attached, no institutions. It was just the people and the natural world, and their interaction and participation with it. And that's what really started drawing me to that. I was raised Christian
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to get to that root, and I found for myself that really the root of Christianity, Judaism, what have you, has a shamanic root, just like every religious institution actually does. Every institution has that original, founding prophet or prophetess that had a vision, had a connection with spirit, and they had a message to deliver, or they had medicine to give to the world. And it's just, religions start because people start following them rather than really what the aspect of shamanic soul is about is no, you are that. Every person has that ability to connect with spirit naturally. You are the only thing that should stand between you and the world of spirit and your concept of goddess, God, the great originating mystery, whatever. And so that's what really drew me to it. And I was very connected to that world and that idea for a while. Did a lot of research in my younger years. I've learned from different people from different areas, such as Wicca, um, Western ceremonial magic, and many other venues. But it wasn't until I connected with someone who was a part of a shamanic lineage from Peru,
Mm-hmm.
which I outlined in my book, that it just everything really started to flow for me. Everything just came natural. And I don't think it's necessarily because that Peruvian lineage is more special than any other lineage. It just happened to connect with me during that time of my life in the right way. So because there is no right way. That's what makes shamanism. Shamanism is that it's all based upon the individual and how they can connect to spirit rather than a prescribed formula or specific tradition that has the one way to do it.
I absolutely love that. And, kind of talking about growing up Christian and all that, I was somebody who also grew up very Christian. And I laughed out loud during a part in your book where you actually talked about when everybody bowed their heads and you were looking up to see if Jesus was in the rafters instead. And I was like, I did that as a kid and got in trouble for it.
Yeah,
It was really
yeah.
interesting. And I absolutely love that, yes, there are so many aspects of shamanism that are connected to all different facets of religion. But a lot of times when you start really getting into the religious aspects or the religious doctrines of it, I feel like you kind of step away from the shamanic practices at that point, and
Mhm.
it becomes almost more a political aspect versus a spiritual aspect.
Right. Yeah. I was very fortunate in my mentor in this lineage that his whole aim was to ensure that I was not going to be able to lean on him. I, of
Hmm.
course, needed to lean on him for a certain period of time, but his goal was to push me and get me to a place of independence where I truly, truly knew and can feel and experience in my life not having to use him in
Hmm.
any way, shape, or form, go through him, ask him for advice. And as he was doing that, he was like, this is the way you should even just be teaching your children. This is the way we have to support each other in being adults in this world. We can keep that childlike innocence, of course, in our hearts, but we have to support each other's independence, and you should never allow any one person, thing, or book or idea come between you and your connection to the realm of spirit. And I'm saying spirit a lot
Hmm.
because a lot of people are familiar with that term and use that term. Because my book is called Shamanic Soul, I actually personally prefer the term soul, at both to describe not just the soul of the individual, but also the soul of the world, the soul of Mother Earth, and the greater universal soul, which for me, that's where the juice is at. That's where the connection is.
Absolutely. And I'm kind of like you. I can use spirit or soul, kind of interchangeably, whichever one people kind of identify with, but essentially they kind of mean the same thing. So, if you're wanting to look at it from a paranormal sense and you're kind of thinking of it's like, oh, there's spirits here, they're just souls. They're
Mhm.
just that energetic version of yourself that's still on this plane or in a version of this plane, whichever you'd like to call it.
Sure.
There's just a lot of interchangeable terms, which you do talk about in your book as well, which is really nice. And yeah, the one thing that I ask a lot of the shamanic practitioners that do come on the show and they do talk about their practices and all that. If you were going to give advice to somebody who was wanting to start out dipping their toes into a shamanic way of life, what would be your initiatory advice for them?
Well, first and foremost, to understand what it is that you are seeking.
Mm-hmm.
First and foremost, are you just seeking a way of trying to heal a certain aspect of yourself? Are you seeking a way to manifest things in your life? Are you seeking a connection with soul or spirit? Because that's going to be very important, because an aspect of the shamanic way of life that I appreciate the most is exactly what I just said. It is a way of life.
Mm-hmm.
It is not just a practice that you adopt and discard whenever you're just done with it because you've manifested what you want. And it really becomes your whole worldview and your whole mode of service, because that's essentially what it becomes, is as a shamanic emissary between this world and the other realms. You are a sort of ambassador, and you have to act as a sort of medium point between both of those realms. So thus you can't just compartmentalize that.
Yes.
You sometimes need to, in order to function in the world. So you have to become really well balanced in that too. So that's one aspect. And the other thing I would say is, be prepared for heavy shadow work, because uh, the shamanic path begs the practitioner to constantly evolve and discard oneself of any aspects of pride or hubris that could get in the way of you being of service. So you should never be relaxed or comfortable with your current state of reality, and always be ready for it to completely turn upside down,
Mm-hmm.
based upon the various ceremonies that are involved, and just even messages you might receive from spirit, either via through a vision or dream or whatnot.
I absolutely love that. And, kind of referring again back to your book, and sorry, everybody, I'm going to do that a lot during this episode because it really was that great. Uh,
Yay.
but there was a line in it that really stood out to me that was talked about the fact that a shamanic practitioner should always be ready to jump into the turmoil of the sea.
Mhm.
And it was just such a profound kind of imagery that's like, okay, yeah, I get it. I get it. And I love it. It was so good.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah,
love that.
that was a very rigorous aspect of my particular training. Um, you know, we would engage in ceremonies, and whether we were using hallucinogenic sacraments or not. Um, the goal of the practitioner was to be able to hone the energies of the ceremonial group, and to be able to keep them temperate, like a calm lake,
Hmm.
on a mountain. And but there's a lot of turmoil that comes up in these, and you got to be able to be ready for that. People will have outbursts. People are facing really hard, heavy, dark, deep things sometimes, and you yourself too. So you have to keep everything calm and moderate as much as possible, for the entirety of the group, for the entirety and safety of the container. So it's like you got to be able to adapt easily to that. So when like those heavy winds, those heavy currents come, what does a sailor do? In a boat, they don't fight against those winds or resist them. You have to kind of roll with the current a little
Hmm.
bit, roll with that flow, and utilize and leverage those winds to get where you need to go, rather than pushing back against them.
Yes. And that's a beautiful image as well. And that's the one thing that I think that when I was reading your book, kind of was thinking about it. And it was one of those things of we're seeing so much turmoil in the world right now. And it's like, okay, everybody could stand to actually read this book. Again, I'm gonna promote it because it was so good. I loved it. But anyway, it was one of those things that I'm like, everybody has got so much turmoil that's happening right now. And if we just kind of stopped for a minute and reassessed, perhaps it wouldn't be so daunting. And especially because we have gone through several daunting years, at least, well, yeah, I would say even globally, with pandemics and everything else. And there's just so much that's happened that has made it incredibly difficult for people to almost thrive in a way.
Mhm.
And looking at it from a shamanic perspective, it's one of those things of instead of, all of us probably freaking out, maybe we should have been turning inward and doing work during those 2 years.
Oh,
uh
absolutely. Mhm.
that would have been a lot better, I think. But everybody teach their own. But it was still such an amazing kind of experience to think about. And thinking back to my own shamanic experiences and my own trainings that I've had in the past, that it was one of those things that it made me realize, it's like, oh, hey, you haven't done that for a while. You should probably go do that again and do some
Mm,
work, because you get caught up in life,
right.
unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. I these past few years have been very interesting for me and my community. Um, and my wife underwent training with me, and we've relatively in the past few years, I've been calm about the state of things, and it troubles a lot of people in our communities sometimes, of like, well, aren't you ready to take up arms? Aren't you ready to, just like get crazy? They just get so out of shape, and it's just a reminder to them of the illusion of reality. That doesn't mean
Yes.
that it's not real, but at the same time, to understand the matrix of existence, in the sense that you don't have to be a slave to every thing around you. So we remind anybody who calls us out on that, of you know let us know what your political ideology is, or your social ideology. We more than likely align, but we're just not allowing the emotionality of it to tear us from one extreme to the other, because ultimately, you know the the shamanic perspective is about being like the eagle or the condor in
Mm-hmm.
the sky, and seeing things from a wider perspective of above, than just being on the ground. When you're on the ground, you see all the threats around you. You see the things lingering in the woods, so on and so forth. But from above, you don't see all that. You see the greater picture of Mother Earth. You see the greater beauty. You know that some of that stuff is down there, but you also don't see borders,
Yes.
that divide the states and the countries and the ideologies together. You see the greater um, plan, and the greater soul. I'd use that word again, the
Mm-hmm.
greater world soul of Gaia. And you just rest with that imagery, and rest with that medicine, moving forward. You can still have your particular ideas and your opinions of how things go, but to always just kind of like ride above, from a higher level, knowing that the world's going to keep turning, the sun's going to keep rising. There's like always a new day. Things aren't ended, and we still have a lot that we can do, but it just takes time. Change is not instantaneous. It never has been.
Mm-hmm. And to kind of counter that as well, that change is not instantaneous either. Sometimes it is. Sometimes
Mm.
life can literally throw you a curveball and your life
Sure, sure,
changes immediately.
sure.
But on a global scale, change is never immediate.
Right.
It's always constantly in flux. And, I'm one of those people that I get very passionate about a lot of things, as many people do. But at the same time, I always have to kind of pull it back in and say you can't be obsessed with it just because you're passionate about it. And being obsessed with it is when you have a lot of that negativity that comes in, and you start to feel that anger and that hatred and all of that, all the negative crap that you shouldn't always be consumed with. Yes, you
Right.
can be passionate about it, and yes, you can want the good change, but you also have to realize that there's a lot of change that's going to happen whether you want it or not.
Yeah.
And you have to learn how to accept that. And that's probably humanity's biggest challenge ever. And because we don't like change, we like things that are comfortable and easy. And if life was always that way, eventually we'd get bored and we would force change. So
Yeah, not on the shamanic path. Like we've
no.
learned how to be comfortable with change, and be comfortable with What we call in the Peruvian tradition I was trained in, we call a pachacuti, which is a
Hmm.
world reversal. It's literally the world turning upside down. It is the tilling of the soil in agriculture,
Hmm.
and that's a term we use for these huge changes that come in. These pachacutis, they are um, world altering experiences, and like you have to learn how to embrace those, because these experiences, although they seem tumultuous and they seem scary, they are actually the greatest windows of opportunity for evolution, for everyone involved. It's just a matter of rising up to that. And I know for a fact oftentimes it doesn't seem that way, because I've been through the dark night of the soul, and I've
Hmm.
been through horrible experiences and horrible times in my life where I thought this was it. This was like you couldn't get any lower. But it's, again, it's like from that eagle or condor perspective. As I look back now, I can see how that catalyzed me to a greater path of evolution, and I'm like way better off now than I've ever been before. Um, it's just a crazy roller coaster ride.
It is a crazy roller coaster ride. And, kind of talking about that Dark Night of the Soul, I remember back to one of my many, I've had a few, but probably my biggest one was, when I got my MS diagnosis and
Mm,
realizing that every day is chaos.
mm,
Every day is change because you never know what you're going to expect, because you never know what the body's going to throw at you.
mm,
You might wake up one day and everything works great and you're having a great day and you have all the energy in the world to do all the things, which is my favorite kind of day. And then there's
right,
other days when you wake up and you're like, hey, why don't my legs work today? Oh, right. You have MS.
right.
That's why. Learn to roll
Yeah,
with it. Literally.
yeah,
Uh, it's such a challenge, but, and we're seeing so many people that right now are dealing with similar challenges, especially due to the pandemic. And we're seeing a lot of people that are getting those disability diagnoses due to long COVID. And my heart goes out to all the people who have endured that, because it is starting to look a lot similar to the way MS responds to the body, unfortunately. So I'm so sorry that you're having
hmm,
to go through this. But
yeah,
at the same time, you know, if you are somebody who is interested in shamanic work, this might be one of those dark nights of the soul for you, and you might come out stronger on the other side, but you have to do the work. Not to say that it's going to be easy. It never is. It's always challenging, and it's
right,
always painful in like not a fun way. But when you get out of it, you're like, wow, that feels so good to be out of that, and I feel so much better. Uh,
yeah. And I'm not also not talking about that it's necessarily this higher state of luminous joy
yeah.
that you get to. That's not what I'm talking about at all, because
Hmm.
a true, like, I don't consider myself a shaman, but the true shamans that I have met and that I have trained with, they will tell you life sucks.
Hmm.
It's not cool. There are things that just you're going to get delivered to you, and your medicine is to just learn how to be with that, and to have that as a part of your life. This doesn't mean that we're all evolving into light beings that are just going to float around and with harps playing all the time. That's not what this is. This is a human experience, and we're
Hmm.
here to be human. And what the shamanic work does is just help you with your life circumstance in such a way that um, allows you to use it to the best of your capability and your ability to use it, and also to be able to give medicine to others, whether it's
Hmm.
inspiration or ideas and whatnot, and to continue that, because that's the currency of the universe, is ideas and imagination. That's the stuff that keeps the universe flowing and moving forward, and that's what we need to do as human beings, rather than give in to entropy.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And, the other thing too that you talk about in your book is the fact that how shamanism is linked to creativity,
Mhm.
and how we should really embrace our creative natures because honestly, to get through anything, you need to be a little bit creative. You
Yeah.
have to find the new roads because the road that you're on may not be the best road for you. So you might have to traverse literally through the thick of the woods to get there.
Right.
Um, Figuratively, of course, everyone, but it's one of those things that the creative process of it is can be absolutely so much fun to try to figure it out. Um, it may be challenging, of course, but in the beginning, and then as you go through it, you're like, wow, this is actually really kind of fun to figure this out and to try this different way and look at something completely differently. And that's one of the things I absolutely love about shamanic work is that you get to see the world again upside down, and it's just an exciting way to look at things.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it is a almost synonymous um, way of life, the
Mm-hmm.
creative life in shamanism. And I consider most artists that I've met, whether they're, musicians, poets, painters, they're just continuing the shamanic way in their own way. They're tapping in and flowing with that. And every human being, if you're human, you have creativity. I've heard people say, oh, I don't have a creative bone in my body. You do. It just doesn't look like you're Mrs. or Mr. Painter, like, or whatever. That like creativity is something that every human being has. It's part of the makeup of the brain itself. It's just finding your channel for that, your particular flow. um, and that's something, my shamanic training actually did for me. It just
Mm-hmm.
helped me kind of find exactly what my flow is. And to me, that's soul. Like that, there are people and things that can be soulless, and it's because they haven't found what their shtick is. They're just stuck, and they're just a void. And I've worked with a lot of these people. So soul isn't just a stagnant thing. It's something that has to be nurtured, and it has to be planted, nurtured, and then grown,
Mm-hmm.
and continually nurtured after that. And the more that you do, the more your soul grows, and expands your purview of vision, of what we call vista, um, of worldly experience and otherworldly experience. So it's just doing the work to find what that flow is for you, like what you came here to manifest as.
I absolutely love that. It's um one of those things that as you do the work, you will find what your creativity looks like. It might be problem solving. That might just be your creativity
Yeah.
is that you're really good at that.
Yeah.
And you just may not realize that you are good at that. It doesn't have to be something artistic per se.
Sure.
It can be something just as mundane as, again, problem solving. So there you go. There's something that you might actually be really good at that you're just like, oh no, that's not a creative thing. Actually, it really is. I promise you it
Yep. Yep.
is.
Yep.
um, so you have also written another book that I actually wasn't aware of until today because when I was working on your bio stuff for the interview, that's the Shamanic Kabbalah. Can you tell everybody a little bit about that book?
Yeah, that was my first book with Llewellyn.
Mm-hmm.
And this book actually came very soon after my shamanic training. And I connected with an individual in the Western mystery tradition who is experienced with Kabbalistic pathworking. And he decided to initiate me and a group of individuals into the Kabbalistic tree of life. um, Fairly similar in the Golden Dawn method, of path working initiation, but kind of his own spin and incorporating other influences like Dion Fortune and Dolores Ashcroft Nowicki and so on and so
Mm-hmm.
forth. And so I immediately came out of that and wrote that book, and I actually wrote this book Shamanic Kabbalah more as a field guide, like a field manual for myself,
Right.
in navigating the tree of life, and the different Sephiroth on the tree of life and the different interactions with the tarot and whatnot. Because that's all it is. The tree of life is just it's not just a symbol, it's a composite symbol. It's a symbol made up of other symbols that you can bring in and interface with it, that basically unlock, each of those symbols can unlock like a key, different aspects of the conscious mind. And so initiation involves, numerous ceremonies, and meditations that get you to interact with the various Sephiroth and the paths on the tree of life. And it took about, excuse me, it took about 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a really complex subject matter. I never understood Kabbalah until I went through shamanic training. So it was vital for me to fuse the two together for my own understanding. I don't know if it'll ever make sense to anybody else. But it made sense for me, and I actually just made Shamanic Kabbalah for me, for my own reference. And my wife was like, "You should just submit it." And I just, on a whim, submitted it to Llewellyn, and I got a response within a day.
Oh, wow.
By the publisher. It was like, "We're publishing this," and I've gotten a lot of great feedback on it. So I'm actually really surprised. I never expected it to go out. And I mean, I've had people from England and across the world that have messaged me about it, and as how helpful it is. And I guess I do hope that it can be a help to those that are interested in dipping their toe into Kabbalah, because like, where to start? It's
it's
a
daunting.
complex subject. Yeah, it's daunting. It always was for me. I never got it for some reason until I went through shamanic training. And then it all just started clicking for me. And so yeah, I mean, that's kind of, my hope for it is that it can help new readers in terms of the Kabbalah, but also I have had some people read it and say, "No, I'm still confused. I'm still," and I don't know where to point anyone in regards to that. I mean, we had to spend, as our training, my wife and I and the other community of people that he brought together to train us, we had to do like a full year of reading. Like, our reading pile was, I mean, if I stacked all the books high, they probably went past my head.
Oh, wow.
And it was just study, 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 and then rituals to even just prepare for the pathworking itself. So it is a lot of information. I just had to distill it in some way, shape, or form, and that's the result.
Well, that is super cool. I will admit that when it comes to Kabbalah, I am very a novice, I guess you could say. Like, yeah,
Mhm.
I'm just one of those people that I've tried to read up on it, and it's like trying to read quantum physics for me.
Yeah,
It just goes
yeah,
over my head, and I'm like, I have no idea what you guys are talking about. I can understand most things when it comes to any form of spiritual study, but this is above my head. This is above my
yeah.
pay grade. So I'm gonna have to get a copy of this just to see if it will help me understand it a little better.
Yeah, if you do, let me know what you
Yeah,
think,
I
because
will.
I'm curious to see how, I'm trying to gather feedback in terms of those that are more from a Western mystery tradition ritual perspective, and
Mhm.
those from a more witchy shamanic perspective, and to see how it goes, right? And see like which side does it appeal to more, and is it more beneficial for? But yeah, it is like quantum physics, at least it was to me. And yeah, I'll be interested to see if it helps you kind of understand the material a little bit more.
I will definitely check it out and let you guys know. And to everyone listening, I will also let you know. After I get it, I might just have you come back on the show so we can talk more about it and talk about my experience with it.
Sure, anytime.
That would be definitely fun. So you also are a cartoonist. And you
Yeah.
talk about this in your book, and you talk about how your shamanic journey actually led you back into that. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and your cartoon works as well?
Yeah, this kind of goes back to the conversation of your flow and finding your soul path, and what life can do to you if you don't move forward on your soul path. Like, so when I grew up, all I ever wanted to be was a cartoonist, a comic book artist. It was everything to me. It was really, truly my religion, art and illustration in that way. But out of fear, I did not pursue the path. My life went down a venue of self sabotage, insecurity. I was too afraid to pursue it. I went down a completely other life path that was really quite soulless. I was just kind of a zombie, just finding jobs to just support my family, and that's it. And wasn't wasn't allowing myself and gifting myself the medicine that cartooning and illustration actually brings for me. And it was through my shamanic training that I was able to rid those blocks inside of myself,
Mm-hmm.
and gain the confidence to just do it, to just like go out there and do it, and to not be afraid of what the result is, to not be afraid of feedback, critique, to just move forward. And yeah, that's kind of the result of my book, Shamanic Soul, is showing how I went from a miserable wretch to being in a place where, yeah, I still have a full-time job, doing whatever to support my wife and children. But every spare moment when I'm not being a dad or working, I am making cartoons and I'm making comics, and I've been putting my stuff out there. And now I am involved in the comics community, albeit the independent comics community. But
Mm-hmm.
I've been interacting with cartoonists, artists, writers, and people that I are the perfect mix of people for me, that just speaks to me, the interactions, the relationships I'm building, and interacting with people that used to be heroes with mine, and even working with them and getting published along with them. All of these are like dreams come true for me. I have a bucket list of what I want to do in this life before I die.
Mm-hmm.
And just in the past 5 years alone, when I decided to step into this, I've like check marked like half that list.
Oh,
It's
that's so
just
awesome.
it's just like to have this feeling that I know that I will die and I will have completed the things that I really truly did want to complete in this life is just, it's everything. And
Mm-hmm.
that's like what we need to do is, find a way to get that bucket list taken care of. Like, what did we come here to do? And so that way, when we die, which we all will, and this is a shamanic teaching, to die with grace, to
Mm-hmm.
to embrace, mistress death with open arms, and just be at peace with that end that's coming. And you can only do that by finding your flow. And so yeah, and part of the comics that I started making, or I initially started making, were about my shamanic journey. The comic series is called Psychonaut Presents, and it was sort of like an anthology of different stories
Mm-hmm.
that I put together that are all based upon my initiatory experiences. And one of them, one the first one was about one of my first experience with ayahuasca, and the second one was my rites of passage that my shamanic mentor put me through, that my ceremony that discarded my younger immature self and pushed me into adulthood. And they were really well received. I started getting a name out there, and now I have like cartoonists all over the world that recognize me and recognize my name. And it's really cool. It's the medicine of it just keeps flowing and flowing, and I'm out there making more and more comics now. Like, I'm not stopping. I'm working on 3 books right now.
Oh, yay.
um, just today, I contributed to another book someone else is doing. I contributed a gallery piece for it. I mean, I've got jobs coming at me left and right, and it's just, and people are like, how do you find the energy? And it's like, well, when you find your soul path,
Mm-hmm.
you have the energy. you have the energy. I mean, I'm in my mid 40s and I work full time. I'm a full time dad, but yeah, I still have the energy to do all that in my spare time, because when you find what you love to do, there's no such thing as being too tired to do it. You
Right.
know, you're
Exactly.
doing it. It's just who you are. Again, it is a way of life. It becomes your way of life. Um, and I've just incorporated all of it into my shamanic work. I have comic stuff that are on my shamanic altar that I utilize in my ceremonies because it is my thing. It is, and it's like I have like comic things, like whether it's pens, pencils, or comics themselves from people I love that are on my altar with like ancient artifacts from like 1,000 years ago, shamanic lineage, like together, because they're all conscious things and they're all conscious tools to get me to where I am and to get me to the place that I need to be able to distribute my medicine.
Hmm.
And it all works. It's all part of the same magical flow. And so, yeah.
I absolutely love that. That is so amazing. As you were talking about, the fact that some of your idols are now working with you because of your shamanic work and all that, it kind of reminded me of when I was, reading through your book. I stopped this morning and I told my husband, I said, his book reminds me of having a conversation with you. And he and I have these deep, esoteric, wonderful conversations that will last for hours. Part of the reason why I married him.
Yep.
But the other one was your book reminded me of sitting down with one of my idols and one of my favorite human beings on the planet, Michelle, Bill, and Shay.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
If you've never actually gotten to sit down and have a conversation with her, I highly recommend it. She is an amazing human. She is somebody that you could just listen to her read you the dictionary, and she will do it with such grace and poise and beauty and mystery that will make you just go, I don't care about what you're reading, but it's perfect. Keep going. And the wording and the way that you did it, and talking about all of your experiences, especially your supernatural experiences throughout the book, was very much in part of conversations I've had with her. So it was
Oh,
super,
that
super cool.
I consider that a high compliment. So thank you.
She's an amazing human. Your book is wonderful. I can't wait to read your first book, not your new book. And also, where can people find your comics?
So really, you can go to my website. I have a shop on my website where you can get my comics. They're really on a big cartel. So you can either go to danielmoellerweb.com, or
Okay.
you can go to danielmoellerbigcartel.com, and you can get them directly from me right now.
Okay.
I do have them on extraneous other websites and other venues, but I have a stock that I'm trying to sell first, because I'm out of convention season, so I'm trying to get that stock lifted. But after that, you can find them on indieplanet.com. And also, I actually have distribution coming up soon through amazon.com that I'm
Oh,
working on as
perfect.
well. So, yeah.
That is so, so perfect. I cannot wait to read your comics. Again, I didn't know you were a comic artist until I read your book, but it was all super fascinating and I am excited to read them. And also, quick question. My daughter loves comics and all that. Are they kid appropriate? She's 10.
Oh, 10. I have one comic. It's like a sci-fi Star Warsy kind of comic
Love
that
it.
is kid appropriate
Okay.
for that age.
Okay.
Because I wanted to have something that my own children and then grandchildren can read and look at too. And so yeah, that's very important to me. So I do always have a venue for that as well. And I have but yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
perfect.
Mhm.
Very, very nice.
Yeah.
So do you have any new books coming up besides your comics? Do you have anything else that's in the works besides that?
Yeah, so I do have a couple of new comics that are coming out soon. One that I just finished. It's number issue 2 of the Simon Myth Chronicles, which
Hmm.
is that's kind of my if people are familiar with Dresden Files
Hmm.
or John Constantine Hellblazer,
Love
it's
all
kind
of
of like
it.
my Clive Barker-esque, like, modern day fantastical magic series. I love it. I love working on it. And issue 2 is I just finished. It's going to be available soon. Issue 1 is available to buy at my website. And then I do have a couple of regular books, but non-picture books
Mm-hmm.
that I am working on right now. One is really about art and culture, because that was my original degree, was liberal arts,
Mm-hmm.
specifically in modern art and postmodern art. So I have one book I'm working on about that, and another one that is more paranormal based, based upon about the Men in Black. Correct. Everybody knows about
Oh.
the Men in Black. Well, I've had experiences, and I'm starting to connect with people who have had experiences with people in red, red individuals that are not as malevolent as the Men in Black. They're more, and I actually wrote a book about them too, but it's a fiction book. And after I wrote that fiction book, it's called Red Mass, about these individuals. I started having experiences where these individuals were coming into my life and
Mm-hmm.
other people coming to me. I was on the Higher Side Chats podcast a couple months ago, and I brought this up, and I got maybe 100 messages from people who said they have experienced these people in red before as well.
So what is
And
the difference between I've never heard of the red people. I've heard of Men in
yeah,
Black, but
yeah,
I've never heard
they're
of the
not
people in
they're
red.
not like, yeah, they're not well known. So in my estimation, and what I've garnered so far, and how I brought them into my book actually, was they're more about helping people remember paranormal experiences, and they're more of like promoters of paranormal experiences. Either that, or they're
Oh.
fairly neutral. And other people, individuals I've talked to, sometimes their experiences are fairly neutral. They're not malevolent. They're not like Men in Black, and they are trying to get you to forget or to shut up or to keep the supernatural episode secret. They're more about like they're a part of that realm. And I've done some research, and there's even some folk tales of individuals I've read. So I wonder if they're even kind of part of the Fey realms a little bit. But see, this is what part of my book is about, is doing this research and trying to develop some theories as to what they are. Not a well-known phenomenon, but it turns out there's way more people out there that have had this experience than what I assumed. I
That
didn't even
is
know it was a real thing at
cool.
all. I didn't even know it was a real thing at all whenever I wrote the book. I wrote the book based upon a dream, and then it turns out like it's an actual phenomenon. So
Oh, that is so cool. I would love to sit down one of these days with you and just talk paranormal experiences because, I think if you end up in almost a shamanic way, kind of bringing it back full circle, I think a lot of people who have worked in the shamanic circles or have had shamanic experiences also have a lot of paranormal experiences.
of course, yeah,
And so I
they
have
they go hand in
boatloads.
hand.
Actually, how I got into podcasting is a friend of mine and I started a paranormal podcast talking about all of that. So that's
Nice,
super cool.
nice.
I love that. I can't wait to read that one. That one's going to be super excited. I'm kind of nerding out a little bit while you were talking about it. I was like, oh, I want to read it now. um,
Yep.
but I love that kind of stuff. That is kind of one of my passions and joy. In addition to talking about witchy stuff and spiritualism and all that good stuff. That's my nerdy happy place.
Oh, 100%.
So I love it so much. But this has been so much fun. I would love to have you back. Like I said, I'd love to have you back to talk about the other book as well and kind of, break it down and talk about my experiences with it. And
Yeah,
that would be super cool. And especially when your book, the one about the people in red comes out, I'd love to have you back to talk about that as well because
great.
I would totally nerd out just talking. I'm like I said, I'm nerding out now. I'm so excited for you.
Yeah. Well, it's again, it's not as a wide phenomenon as the Men in Black, so it's taking a while to do the research. So I
That's
don't know.
totally fine.
Yeah, I
I
don't
will
know
wait
how long.
forever for it. It's
Yeah.
cool.
Cool.
I love it so much. Well, Daniel, this has been an absolutely amazing experience having you on the show. Like I said, you are welcome to come back anytime. Are you on social media? Where can people connect with you? Especially if you have stories about what he's talking about and you'd like to give him your experiences. I'm sure he would love to have the research. So, how can people get in contact with you?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook and Instagram
Okay.
as The Real Daniel Moeller. So at The Real Daniel Moeller.
Okay.
And I also have a YouTube channel, Daniel Moeller Psychonaut Sessions, where I do different interviews with different cartoonists, but also I'm kind of moving into the metaphysical world too. I'll be interviewing Jamie Elford soon, who wrote Tarot Way of Life,
Mm-hmm.
or Tarot Inspired Life. So I'm going to be start doing mystical psychonaut sessions as well on YouTube. So yeah, those are the places you can find me.
Very, very cool. Well, everybody, go pick up a copy of Daniel's books. They are just phenomenal, especially the Shamanic Soul. That is the one I can definitely tell you need to buy today. Pause this episode, go to Amazon, buy it right now. There's a link in the description. You guys will love it. I promise you. Check out his comics, connect with him, especially if you have paranormal stories about what he was talking about. Please connect with him because your research might help him with his book and get it out faster. So,
Right.
yes, Daniel, thank you so much for this. This has been amazing. And everybody out there, take care of yourselves, stay safe, and we'll see y'all next time.
Thank you.